Sarcasm isn't communication, it's avoidance. Guilt jokes aren't funny. They are emotional manipulation. So if you are using sarcasm as a default and guilt tripping people and trying to make jokes, you are delaying your leadership and you are hurting every single relationship in your life. You can't lead without good communication. And you can't grow saying if you're taking everything as a personal insult. And this is the stuff we get into on this episode of Success Unscripted. It's actually a replay of an Instagram live I did, so I cannot wait for you to tap in. Let me know your feedback and let me know what you think. Now let's go. Over 30 and still using sarcasm as your go-to, guilt tripping people and saying it's a joke, and making jokes that just aren't funny in order to communicate what you want to say, and not using your real big person words. I'm sorry to break it to you, but that's actually a sign of emotional immaturity. So let's go ahead and let's talk about it. We're talking about our emotional maturity, and we're talking about how people continue to use sarcasm and continue to do like those guilt jokes. You know what I'm talking about? So this has been coming up a lot for me, so I wanted to talk about this because I actually started doing research on it because I was really curious. Listen, I used to be the sarcastic queen. Like, sarcasm? I know how to do that. And what we know is that we use sarcasm to kind of filter or hide what we actually want to say. Yeah, thank you. Perfect. Okay. And so I want us to talk about this because we're very used to it. We're very used to using sarcasm, guilt tripping people. People guilt trip us all the time. We do it back to them. I want us to stop. It's annoying and it shows a lack of maturity. And so if you're over 30, you need to stay here and listen to this. You need to stay here and listen to this because the goal really is for you to say what is actually on your mind. It's so common forever. Think about it. Like, moms are known to guilt trip. Moms, we're known to guilt. Why don't you call your mother more? Right? We're known to do that. So guilt tripping it's very common. And so I would love, but what really pisses me off is when people guilt trip and then try to say it's a joke. It's not actually, that's story time. Let's talk about it. So I'm going to give you a little story. I'm going to give you a little peek behind the veil. I don't really talk about my dating life very much, but let's talk about it. Grab your tea, people. Grab your tea. Let's get into it. Okay, you're right. Since forever, exactly. I just lied to myself there. Don't worry about it. We lie to ourselves all the time, but I'm here to wake us up. But by the way, I want to just double click on that for a minute because we say things like that, like, oh, nowadays this and nowadays that. And it's like, babe, this has been happening forever. This has been happening since our parents probably could remember. Hi, Isaiah. We're talking all about how people use guilt tripping to not really say what they want, how they use sarcasm to not really say what they want, and I'm over it. If you're over 30, I need us to stop. I need us to stop using sarcasm, guilt tripping, and making stupid jokes that don't make sense. That you're using a joke to actually, instead of saying what you really want, what you really want to say. So I'm giving story time. We're about to get into a story of mine. So I don't really talk about like my personal life that much on here, but we're going to get into it because this has been coming up a lot lately. And so I'm going to give you an example. So I met somebody at Soho House in LA. Call it September. I don't remember the month. So it's September last year or something like that. I'm in LA and my girlfriend and I, we meet somebody. We meet a group of guys. And so we're hanging out. And so one of the guys and I exchanged numbers. Cool. Now I'm in LA visiting. Well, I was there on a conference and then I was visiting my girlfriend, whatever. So I come back to New York. Me and that person never speak. No big deal. I don't think anything of it. Like, who cares? Right? It was fun, whatever. My girlfriend from LA runs into him and he tells her, oh, I've been thinking about her. I'm going to call her. I'm actually going to go to New York. Okay, no problem. None of this is a big deal. He calls me. He's like, oh, I'll be in New York. I was like, oh, perfect. We might as well go back to Soho. Let's go to Soho House, New York. So we go to Soho House, New York. And while we're there, I didn't know it was going to be an event that day. I run into people that I know. He runs into people that he knows. We go to dinner with some of his friends. It's all fun. It's all good. Toward the end of the night, he says, you know what I love about you? I love that once we spoke after so many months, like you weren't like, oh, what happened to you? Oh, like, you know how people are like that. I was just like, oh, I'm available. Cool. I'm easy breezy over here. Okay. So he's like, I love that about you. I was like, you know what? I love that about me too. All right. So this person then had purchased tickets to, I'm not a real movie. I don't go to the movies that much, but he had wanted to see a movie and he was like, oh, can we go to the movies the next day? Originally I had said yes, but then I got invited to a gala that I really wanted to go to. And mind you, I don't know this person. Okay. Remember that part. So I'm like, oh, we have to reschedule. He was here for a couple of days. So we rescheduled for another day. That day now comes and I text them like, hey, what time was the movie again? Keep in mind, I don't know this person. He says to me, wow, I must really be on the bottom of your totem, on the bottom of your priority list or something like that. And gives me this whole like, I'm like, what? In my head, I'm like, now I don't want to go at all. But of course, like I had already committed to going. So I go. But what I really thought, this is what I really thought. What I really thought was, this is the universe testing me. This is God telling me, you're all about communication. You're all about tough conversations. Let's address this with this person. I was like, damn. All right, let's do it. So I said, okay, how am I going to tell this person, like, yo, you just said that what you loved about me was that I didn't guilt trip you when you reached out to me after months. And now that I'm asking you what time is the fucking movie. Okay, sorry for the cursing, but you know I curse over here. Now you want to guilt trip me? I was like, let's go. Let's talk about this. All right. So funny thing was that the movie thing got all messed up and we didn't even go to the movies. So we're going to dinner or we're going to lunch or whatever it was because it was earlier in the day. And so I was like, okay, how am I going to do this? Okay. So we're sitting down and eating and I'm like, hey, remember when you said what you loved about me? Exactly. Yo, you just said, right, exactly. So I said, but I want to be nice about it, right? Because I want it to land. I don't want the person to get defensive. Mind you, like, homeboy is grown, like, very grown. He's not 30. He's very grown, okay? So I said, hey, but listen, as I'm telling the story, I want you to keep you in mind. I want you to keep you in mind on when you guilt trip people, okay? All right. So I said, remember when you said what you loved about me most was that you reached out to me after a couple of months and I didn't like guilt trip you. I didn't ask you why you haven't called. I didn't really ask anything. Like, oh, you'll be in New York. You want to go? I'm available. Let's go. And he's like, yeah, I remember. And I said, don't you think that's what you did to me today? And he was like, his back went up. He was like, absolutely not. It's very different. I said, okay, how so? It's very different. We knew each other already. Like at this point, we know each other now. I mean, for a whole 24 hours, but okay. Yeah, it's very different. Where? So I said, okay. He was like, plus it was a joke. Oh, so you were guilt tripping me, but it was a joke. And he's like, yeah, it was a guilt joke. Okay. So what's the definition of a joke? Yo, he was pissed. He hated me at this point. I'm sure he wanted to leave that restaurant. I said, so what's the definition of a joke? He's like, well, a joke is to make somebody laugh. I said, since when was guilt tripping somebody funny? What's funny is that I didn't say this part because his back was up. I said, listen, you don't have to get defensive. We're just having a conversation here. But what I think is really funny is that people will expect, and I want you to think about you, people will expect you to show up one way, but meanwhile, they don't even show up that way themselves. How the fuck does that work? How does that work? And so I want us to think about ourselves as I told this story about him really loving the fact that I didn't guilt trip him and that I didn't even mention anything, yet he did that to me. And when I called him out on it, his back went up. It was, in his mind, it was completely different. We know it wasn't different. He knows it wasn't different. He's not dumb. But when do you do that? When do you do that? That's the question that I want us to all ask ourselves, because that level of sarcasm, guilt tripping, making jokes that aren't funny, that's a sign of emotional immaturity. That's a sign of emotional immaturity. And so, well, your girl started doing research on it. Because I'm like, let me really think about this. What does guilt tripping really mean? Is he not aware enough? Sounds like he doesn't take much time to reflect on his own actions. But that's all of us on some level, right? Yes. And that's all of us on some level. And listen, I think because I was me kind of calling him out, right? And we don't know each other. I was calling him out. Many times we automatically want to defend ourselves. We automatically want to defend ourselves. Boss babe vibes, you go. More women need to hear these words. But I think men do too. We all need, listen, like when you can call someone out in love, and that's what I was trying to do for him. Again, he doesn't know me. I don't know him. But I was really trying to call him out with love. Like, hey, do you realize that that's what you just did to me? He may not realize it because we're so like in our heads and we're so like programmed into like, that's the way we normally talk. That's what we always do. And I'll give you another example really quick. I was traveling with someone one day and we're on our way back to New York and he was speaking to a stranger, and he told the stranger, oh yeah, I'm back to the shithole, meaning New York. And I said to him, why would you say that? I know you don't mean that. So why would you say that? And he's like, you know what? I don't know. Right? Because sometimes we just talk. We be talking just to talk sometimes, right? So I'm like, listen, I'm sure it's annoying being around me sometimes because I'm like, hey, why did you say that? Why did that happen? Right? I force myself to think about me. And if you're with me, I'm going to force you to think about you. Okay? I did that recently in a discussion with a colleague, but I pulled myself back in that same moment. So I'm working real hard to try and thank you. Exactly my point. We have to stop ourselves. And that's the whole point of this conversation. It's not about him. That's just a funny story in my mind. But it's not about him. It's about understanding where we do that. Because when we start correcting ourselves first, that's where the changes start to really happen. But the embodiment of it, that part. When you can check yourself and say, oh, you know what? I was just going to say something sarcastic and dumb. That's not even what I mean. That's not even what I want to say. That's not even who I want to be anymore. That's not even who I want to be anymore. Right? So when you can stop yourself from saying that stupid sarcastic joke and say what you actually mean, when you can stop yourself from just like old programming. Let me give you one more example. I have another friend who I really, this person I do care for. And I remember when I very first met him, he had a falling out with some friends. The falling out was that they had said something like, oh, you make it all about you. You make everything about you. And this person's a very loving person. Pisces, you know Pisces energy? They're great people. No, well, yes. It is Pisces energy, but he's not a Pisces, actually, now that I think about it. But anyway, okay, so fast forward. My birthday just passed. He calls me to wish me happy birthday and says, you know, Jess, you didn't even invite me to your dinner or whatever it was. Mind you, the person wasn't in town. And so I forgot what happened. The other day they called me and I said about something else, another thing that I didn't do. And I said, you know, what's interesting? And I want to say this with love. I literally said this just like this. I want to say this with love, and I want you to not get offended by this because I care about you. But remember when you called me for my birthday and you said blah, 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 and then you were like, oh, why didn't you invite me? That's an example of you making my birthday about you. And I want you to think about that. I didn't even go into like all the shit I had going on in that moment and why I didn't invite everybody. I didn't even know what I wanted to do. But anyway, I didn't even get into that. He just kind of stood quiet and reflected on that. And I said, if you listen to the 4 agreements or read the 4 agreements, anybody who knows me knows that's one of my favorite books. Agreement number 2 is not to take anything personal. Hard. But when you live like that, it's like freedom. It's like freedom. And so we're here guilt tripping people. We are here being sarcastic. And if you're over 30, I want you to please stop doing that and realize that that is a sign of your emotional immaturity rather, and probably insecurity too. And so I want us to stop guilt tripping and start understanding what is it that I want to say and become a better communicator, because your sarcasm is not communication, boo. Your guilt tripping is not communication. It's not. It's actually a sign. And by the way, let me just say this. Nobody likes it when it's done to them. You hate it when somebody's sarcastic and guilt trips you, but meanwhile you go ahead and do it to other people. In what world does that make sense? In what world does that make sense? Honestly, is that where we could love without attachment? Loving without attachment. Now, I feel like I have older kids. Our kids are the ones, for me, that taught me that the most. 100%. To love without attachment, and be more present in our relationships. Absolutely. Be more present in our relationships. That's the goal. That's what we want from others. But we have to give it to ourselves and to others first. I feel like we have to be the example. And so when we think about guilt tripping, the next time you're in the middle of guilt tripping somebody because that's just what you normally do and you're falling back into your old patterns, I want you to remember this. So like I said, I was like researching why we guilt trip and what that really is and all of that. And so sarcasm and guilt tripping jokes, which aren't funny when they're done to us, but we think they're funny when we do them to others. And I get it because I used to be sarcastic queen, but not anymore. But yes, we know they aren't funny. They're actually masking our expressions. We know that. And they're really masking our unmet needs, right? So think about it like that, right? So it's like you're guilt tripping and you're being sarcastic about something that you really want somebody to do. You really want somebody to do something. And so you rather, instead of putting like your feelings on Front Street, you're going to be sarcastic and guilt trip people. But that's not emotional regulation. That's not us feeling. And listen, your girl used to push down her feelings all the time. So I get it. I completely understand. And then according to a psychologist that I was looking up, guilt tripping is a form of emotional manipulation. Anyone who has done it or has felt it, we know what that feels like. It's a form of emotional manipulation used to control behavior by making somebody else feel responsible for your emotional state. And when we put other people in charge of our emotions, they will disappoint us all the time. And I don't mean that they're disappointing us because, by the way, we do that to others, right? If somebody else if I put my emotional happiness in Jessica's state, then in somebody else's state, in Miss Brandy's hands, then she's eventually going to disappoint me because it's not her job. It's not her job. It's my job, right? And so I want us to release the sarcasm, and I want you to try it today, right? And so there's another quote here. The Journal of Social and Personal Relationships found that guilt-inducing behavior can actually decrease relationship satisfaction and trust over time. Can anybody disagree with that? I can't disagree with that. When people use guilt, they are often trying to express disappointment without admitting vulnerability. This is it right here. When people use guilt, they are often trying to express disappointment without admitting vulnerability. And that's the key. That comes from the Harvard Business Review. And that's the key, right? We want to mask and not express our disappointment or our vulnerability. And that's the connector. It's that we don't have the words. It's that we don't have, and when I found the right words to express my vulnerability and my disappointment, every single one of my relationships changed. Every single one of my relationships changed. And that is why I created Communicate to Lead, because I want us to really think about, and I did it in the tiers that worked for me, which is communicating to self first, communicating to others, mastering difficult conversations, which is key, and then being able to call people out in love, like I just told you, right? Presenting and persuading. And then, of course, public speaking. Of course, public speaking, which you guys know, I was terrible. I was terrible at it. Okay, let's go back into the comments. Hold on. Miss Brandy says, I felt that. Annie says, people use guilt as a way to manipulate. Undoubtedly, right? But we've also been doing it forever, and everyone around has been doing it forever, right? It's like moms are known to be the biggest guilt trippers. We're known for that. Truth. We think by hiding these parts of ourselves, we are doing ourselves, yes. We think by hiding these parts of ourselves, we are like protecting ourselves, but we're actually doing ourselves a disservice, 100%. We are doing ourselves a disservice by not being able to express our disappointment, but not in a guilt-trippy type of way. Us not be able to express our vulnerability, we are hurting ourselves that way. And that's exactly why I created Communicate to Lead. And so, the 4 Agreements, which anybody who knows me knows that's one of my absolute favorite books, because it teaches us take personal responsibility. That's what I love about it the most, is that it shows us how to take personal responsibility. And listen, the concepts in this book is not easy, but it works if you try and if you apply. Number 2 in the 4 Agreements is to not take anything personal, which is challenging, right? Because we love hard. We take pride in our work. We always think, we're good people, which I think we are for the most part, right? I think most people are good. But what does that even mean, right? Because while I think most people are good, I also think we are all the villain in somebody's story. Myself included. We are all the villain in someone's story. So if that's the case, then when we work on not taking everything so personal, then I feel like it feels like freedom. It feels like freedom. And you can do it and still be loving, right? You can not take things personal and still be loving to other people. We could still show it and do it with love, like I tried to do with that story I just told you. Right? So I'm calling them out, but I wanted to do it in a loving way, not in a, don't you think that you blah, 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 right? Like, why would you do that? Why would you say that? We don't even know each other. Like, why would I don't want to do that. Although he did get a little defensive, but it was my energy. I was calmer. I knew what I wanted the outcome to be. I knew that I didn't want him to walk away feeling like I'm yelling or screaming or anything like that, or putting him down. I wanted to just point out a behavior that I noticed. That's it. All. It's for me, it's never about what the person does. It's always about the reaction, though, for me. Because listen, we trigger each other. We make mistakes. We say the wrong thing. All that, to me, that's fine. It's when we have a conversation about it and you're like, nah, and you're like defensive about it. Then I'm like, definitely not my person. Definitely not not for me. Versus the other person I told you about with a friend that was like, why didn't you invite me to your birthday? And I said, well, that's an example of you making it about you. And he took the time to reflect and was like, okay, let me think about this. Now that is a person that I want to continue cultivating a relationship with, right? A friendship with. And so it really takes us figuring that part out. Where are we still being sarcastic? Where are we still guilt tripping people? Because that's not communication. And if you're over 30, I need you to stop that. If we're still feeling triggered by people and we're still taking things personally, I want you to ask yourself, what insecurity did that just hit? Reflect. What insecurity did that just hit? These type of conversations with yourself, that's what's going to get you to the next level. What insecurity did that just hit? Is the question I want you to ask yourself. Why did I need their approval or validation? Is another question I want you to ask yourself. It may have hit some shame in you, right? Yes. Or where am I feeling shame? Where maybe you need to release that shame. Most likely you do. What am I assuming? What am I assuming to be true? Those assumptions will kill us. You know that. What am I assuming to be true? These are all questions you can ask yourself as you're reflecting. And if you're a people pleaser, which I know many and I work with many. Yeah. If you are a people pleaser, definitely building your inner architecture and having these deep conversations with yourself is key, is definitely key. It's one of the reasons people have a tendency to want to be validated by others. Yeah, exactly. But there's so layered and it's so much deeper than that. It's so layered and it's so much deeper than just I want validation. If you were in my stories this weekend, I had a one-on-one with a client. And when I tell you, it's like she thought it was one thing. And then as we peeled the layers back in a 1-hour conversation, her mind was blown and we unpacked something that she had never even thought of, but it went way back. It's not even about now. It's not even about, we were talking about work and it wasn't nowhere near about work. The situation that's coming up now in her job has to do with a long time wound that she had pushed down and that we unpacked in that moment. And so it's one, again, when I think about it all goes back to communication, our words, the things that we say to ourselves, the things that we say to others, it forms our life. And the more that we start thinking about, okay, what am I saying to myself? What am I assuming to be true? What insecurities is this hitting? Why am I pushing? Why do I need validation? Why do I need validation? How do you unpack that for yourself? Why do I need validation from this person in this moment? Mother or family wounds, possibly triggering that emotional response of not feeling good enough. Yeah, 100%. And so I don't think that we realize or understand that our brain is reacting to our emotional, like even in everyday conversations, it's like we don't realize we're either repeating the same thing that we always repeated in our minds, right? Or to people. And we're not present with ourselves. We're not emotionally regulating ourselves. We're not questioning every single emotion, every single thing I think about other people, every single thing I think about myself, everything. Yeah, so when I think about imposter syndrome, I really think about it a different way. I really think about it like if I'm in a room where I'm feeling a little imposter syndrome or feeling like, oh, I don't know if I belong here, it typically means I'm in the right room. That's how I see it. It typically means I'm in the right room. It typically means I'm stretching myself a little bit. It typically means I don't feel I'm in a room where I'm going to learn from people. The key is what you do with that imposter syndrome feeling. That's the key. What do I do with it? How do I show up in that space? Am I shrinking myself or am I still showing up as me? Do I even know what showing up as me means? We are so conditioned by our outside world so much since birth, 100%, on how we are meant to be or look and so on, so on, so on, so on. Behave, think, read, write, the people we're supposed to be around, the people we're not supposed to be around, all of those things. We are conditioned. And so it's our job to uncondition that. And if we continue using sarcasm and guilt tripping and not being honest with ourselves, how in the world can we be honest with anybody else? It probably started before school, but Travis says it all started in school when we were rewarded for action. Positive behavior was the key years ago. But now it seems like all behaviors get rewarded to some degree, right? I know everybody gets the blue ribbon. Everybody gets the blue ribbon. And so if that's the case, how are you changing that for you? How are you changing that for you? And how are you kindly calling people out? How are you kindly calling yourself out? It starts there. How are you kindly calling yourself out? How are you showing yourself more love in a way that is not just like, it's fine if I do that. It's fine if I don't do that. Right? One of the things I said the other day, I was like, you know that quote on Instagram that's like, you're in the right place and you're where you're supposed to be. I'm like, are you though? Are you though? Or are you giving yourself too many freaking excuses? It's up to you to determine that. But are you in the right place? Are you doing enough? Are you? No, maybe not. Maybe not. Maybe you're giving yourself too many excuses. I'll do it tomorrow. I'll think about that later. I'll whatever. And not pushing yourself more. And when I say pushing yourself, I mean pushing yourself, but also with love and gratitude and all and appreciation and all those other things. Dr. Mark Brackett from Yale says that people who score higher on emotional intelligence are less likely to take feedback Okay, stay with me here. Listen to me. People who score higher on emotional intelligence are less likely to take feedback personally and more likely to view it as information. It's just data and not an attack. Because I don't know about you. I don't know if you think you take feedback well or not, but there's a lot of people that do not take feedback well. I just gave you that story earlier, and I don't want that to be you, right? We all want to, if the more emotional intelligent we become and the more we can regulate our own feelings and the more that we can think through, like, why did I behave that way? Why did that trigger me? Why am I doing this to me? That's where you start attracting the right people, right? Or that's where you start distancing yourself from people even faster. You don't have to wait for proof. You don't have to wait for something drastic to happen. It'll be like, no, you know what? That's not my person. Friend-wise, relationship, anything. That's just not my person, right? So it's time for that shift and for us to start acting our age. So if you're over 30 and you're still using sarcasm, using guilt trips, joking about guilt, like, no. Or even saying dumb jokes. Somebody was in my comments the other day, in my DMs, and they made a joke. And I responded like, only a low vibrational person would say something like that. That's literally what I said. Only a low vibrational person would say something like that. And they apologized. They apologized. Because I'm like, no, we're not doing that over here. We're not doing those dumb, stupid jokes that aren't funny. Okay? Self-care, knowledge, love, compassion, and understanding. Yes. So, but when it comes to us acting our own age, it's really understanding how do we want to come across. Who's that 2.0 version? What do they look like? How do they speak? Who are they? Right? And so when you think about how do I want to show up emotionally, and what does your emotional age look like, right? Or sound like, or behave like, specifically when we are upset or triggered, right? And so sarcasm is that's like lazy communication. That's lazy communication. Guilt tripping, that's emotional immaturity. Guilt jokes, that's just like manipulation, kind of masked with a little bit of laughter, which again, a joke is to make someone laugh. Guilt tripping somebody is rarely funny. It's rarely funny, right? So this week, I want you to start checking yourself. I want you to start asking yourself, where am I not showing up as the best person that I want to show up as? Where am I still using sarcasm and guilt tripping to mask what I really want to say and feel, right? Confidence is not being an aggressor. Yeah. If someone sees it that way, then yeah, I would agree. That's not confident at all, in my opinion. And so a person who initiates communication, I think that could be anybody. I think it could go both ways. To me, it's not about who initiates the conversation. It's about the quality of the conversation. The quality of the conversation. It's about the quality of what we're talking about. It's more about the connection you want to have. And so to me, if you want a connection, you want to communicate, if you want attention, if you are asking for that, and if you're hurt, then we need to say, instead of using sarcasm, I want you to say, that just hurt my feelings, or I don't want to get hurt here, or whatever that may be. But using sarcasm is a sign of emotional immaturity. And it's lazy communication. And it's exactly why the main reason why I created Communicate to Lead. So this week, I want you to check yourself, right? Where are you still being sarcastic? Where are you still guilt tripping people? And I want you to know this is not an area for you to beat yourself up. It's awareness. Awareness is always the first step, right? So let's have some awareness around the way we're communicating. How are we communicating to self? How are we communicating to others? What are we doing with difficult conversations? Are we avoiding them? Are we lashing out? What are we doing with them? Because these things show up at work and at home. They show up in all parts of your life. Guilt is not a gift, okay? And sarcasm isn't a strategy. It's lazy communication. And the more we can start saying exactly how we feel, we actually start feeling better. We actually start feeling better ourselves. So the next time somebody hits you with sarcasm, here's what I want you to do. I want you to pause and I want you to ask them, is that about me? Or are you just trying to tell me something else? I feel like you're being sarcastic, but tell me what you really feel. Tell me what's really going on here. You probably will, the person will probably be taken aback, but it may open up a good conversation. And so, I want you to see where you're doing it, but then when somebody does it to you, I want you to have the courage. Having real conversation is having courage. It takes courage to have a real conversation. It does. And so I want you to have the courage to say, hey, what's that really about? I feel like you're being sarcastic or you're guilt tripping me, or call out the action, call out whatever they're doing and ask, what is that really about? Because I want to get to the root. I want to get to the root of what's going on here. And be open to the conversation, right? Stop making assumptions. Don't take things personal. Listen to the 4 agreements. Read the 4 agreements again. And if you're interested in joining us in our next cohort, because the applications are open for Communicate to Lead, where we really work over time on communicating with yourself, communicating with others, mastering difficult conversations, presenting and persuading, and then, of course, public speaking. But thank you so much for hanging out. Thank you so much. But let me know what your biggest takeaway was. Let me know. Put it in the comments, and I'll see you next time. We'll talk soon. Bye.